Yo, what's up guys? Alpha, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to get top 25 with on the arena ladder. Now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTGA zone link down in the description. If you click on that, it'll have the full deck list there that you can just easily import into arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. There's also going to be a text article that I'm working on at the moment that's going to be going up on MTGA zone that will have full details of the deck along with a sideboard guide and how I would change the deck for best of one, etc. So once that's finished and up, I'll link that down in the description as well. And finally, for those people who've been asking about streaming, I've been busy the past couple of weeks sorting out other stuff, but I'm going to finally start streaming next week. I'm going to start on Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 1 PM BST. So I'm going to have my Twitch channel and my Twitter link down in the description. Go follow me on Twitch if you're interested in checking out the streams, and I'm also going to be doing tweets on my Twitter when I'm going live, so go follow me on Twitter as well if you want. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my red-black Umezawa Arcanist deck in Historic. So Arcanist has been an archetype in Historic for a while now. It's always been a very strong archetype, but it's got some really nice additions in both the latest Alchemy set and the latest set Kamigawa as well. So, as the name suggests, if you're familiar with the Arcanist deck, it is largely built around this card, Dreadhorde Arcanist. So this is a 2-mana 1/3 with Trample, and whenever it attacks we can cast an instant or sorcery from our graveyard with mana value less than or equal to Arcanist power. So basically, at a base rate, what that means is that whenever we attack with Arcanist, we get to cast a 1-drop instant or sorcery from our graveyard. And so this deck, if we have a look at the 1-drops we've got here, or the 1-drop instants and sorceries anyway, we've got a bunch of really efficient discard spells and creature removal. So the idea with Arcanist decks in general is you try and go underneath your opponent, strip them of all of their resources, so we're going to be picking out cards off the opponent's hands with our discard spells, killing all the opponent's creatures with our removal, and basically just leaving the opponent at the mercy of the top of their deck. And then once their resources are all gone, we just attack him with our threats and end the game. That's kind of the general game plan of Arcanist. So we'll start off here by having a look at the 1-drop instants and sorceries that we can recast off the Arcanist. So first of all, discard spells. We've got 4 copies of Thoughtseize and 4 copies of Inquisition of Kozilek. These are just the best efficient discard spells in the whole format. Thoughtseize, potentially the best card in the whole format, is so strong. Gets to hit any card out of the opponent's hands. Obviously, generally, Thoughtseize is better than Inquisition because there are a fair amount of cards with mana value 4 or higher that are very important to hit with Thoughtseize. Stuff like Teferi, Collected Company, and also bigger creatures like Crackling Drake or Storming Entity from the Phoenix deck. So in general, Thoughtseize is the better card, but Thoughtseize isn't strictly better than Inquisition because the 2 life loss does matter in certain matchups. In particular, against very aggressive decks or decks that are good at dealing chip damage in the late game, the 2 life loss of Thoughtseize is bad, and we do tend to side out in those matchups. But in general, Thoughtseize and Inquisition, just having a high density of these discard spells that we can rebuy off the Arcanist means that we can very easily strip the opponent's hand of all their important stuff and allow us to get in with our threats. Then in terms of creature removal, we've got 4 Bloodchief's Thirst and 4 Unholy Heat. So I guess the first thing to address here is why I'm not running Fatal Push. Fatal Push is a card that is very good in Arcanist and, one of the best removal spells in the whole format. But the reason I'm not running it in this particular list is because it's basically impossible for us to trigger Revolt, which means that Fatal Push is only going to be killing creatures with mana value 2 or less, which just isn't good enough. In Arcanist, you need to be able to deal with any threat the opponent plays in order for us to start attacking with ours. So if the opponent plays a really powerful 3 or 4 mana creature, something like an Adeline if you're playing against humans, or a Crackling Drake or something, you need to be able to kill those creatures with your removal. And since we're not running anything that typically enables Revolt, sometimes the Arcanist decks are on Croxa, which I'm not running. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, why I'm not running Croxa. And some of the lists are running Fable Passage, which I'm really not a big fan of. Passage, I think, is just too bad in Historic. You need to have a really good reason for running Fable Passage because it is essentially a single coloured land that enters tapped for the first 3 turns of the game. And, back when Omnath and Brainstorm were legal, I feel like those were too powerful enough payoffs to warrant running a tap land for the first 3 turns of the game. But just to enable Revolt, just to enable Delirium, or just to enable Croxa, I just don't think it's worth it because, especially in a deck like this where we really want to have untapped land on turn 1, 2 and 3, Fable Passage just isn't good enough. So overall, Fatal Push, the fact that we can't trigger Revolt means that it's just not good enough at dealing with the broad amount of threats that you're likely to come up against. Whereas Bloodchief's Thirst can kill, not only can it kill any creature, but it can also kill planeswalkers as well. Now obviously being sorcery speed and having to pay 4 mana for the kicker is a bit of a downside, but it's much more important that our removal scales with whatever the opponent's playing. And the great thing about Bloodchief's Thirst is even when we flash it back off the Arcanist, we can still pay the kicker cost in addition, which means that we can use this to kill any creature or planeswalker. And additionally, another big advantage of Bloodchief's Thirst over Fatal Push is that it can kill planeswalkers, which means that it isn't dead game 1 against control in a lot of situations. Then Unholy Heat, potentially the best removal spell in the whole format. Being able to deal 2 damage to creatures or planeswalkers in the early game means that you can pick off basically all of the important to kill early threats, and then it's fairly easy for us to set up Delirium in the mid to late game, which means that this is just going to be able to kill any threat. So if you played against this card, you know how powerful it is, and it's especially powerful in this deck because of Arcanist. One thing to note with Unholy Heat and Arcanist is if you are planning to recast Unholy Heat off the Arcanist and Unholy Heat is the only instant in your graveyard, you will lose Delirium, so be aware of that. You know, you don't want to attack him with the Arcanist thinking you'll deal 6 damage and then you only end up dealing 2. So, and then the final instant and sorcery that's a 1-drop in the deck is Cling to Dust. So I'm a really big fan of running this as a one-of in these kind of decks if you don't have any other escape cards in the deck. If you're running Croxer, I think there's definitely some dis-synergy going on here. You know, you have both cards kind of fighting for the escape cost. But since we're not running any other escape cards in the deck, I think Cling to Dust as a one-of is really nice value. Graveyard Hate is definitely a premium right now in Historic because of the prominence of Phoenix, other Arcanist decks, and the food decks to a lesser extent as well, in addition to other decks like Greasefang as well. So having access to main deck Graveyard Hate is really nice, but the fact that we can recast this over the course of the game because of the escape cost is really nice, and the life gain is also really important as well, because one of the traditional weaknesses of Arcanist decks is that they're not great at gaining life, which does make them vulnerable to decks that have good reach in the late game. Anything that's running burn spells, Phoenix or Cat Oven decks can very easily burn you out, so having access to life gain that's repeatable as well is really nice. So next up, we'll have a look at the other threats in the deck that we've got alongside the Arcanist, starting off with 4 copies of Dragon's Rage Channeler, which is potentially the best 1-drop in the whole format. It's so strong. Particularly in this deck, it's really nice because we have a bunch of non-creature spells that we're going to be casting, and the Surveil on this both helps set up Delirium, helps fuel the graveyard for the Arcanist, and also just helps dig for what we need. You know, helps to make sure that we keep missing keep hitting land drops when we need to. And the fact that this turns into a 3/3 is really good as well, because we do need to be able to close the game out quickly, because it's all well and good completely stripping the opponent of their resources, but the one weakness of that game plan is it doesn't stop the opponent top decking good cards. And in Historic, there are a lot of cards that can help the opponent get back into the game, stuff like Expressive Iteration and Teferi, for example. So once you have stripped the opponent of all their resources, it's really important that you present a fast clock to not give the opponent too many draws to get out of the situation. So the fact that this turns into a 3/3 later in the game means that we can start applying pressure pretty quickly as well. And then finally, we've got 4 copies of Rahilda, which is the last threat we've got in the deck. And I'm going to kind of talk about Croxer here as well, because this is kind of the slot that you might run Croxer in. And I did test Croxer in this list, and it was really strong. You know, Croxer in an Arcanist shell, especially when you're running Channeler, is really powerful, because you can very easily fill the graveyard to escape Croxer, and you can very easily mill over the Croxer with the Surveils as well. However, I was really conscious when I made this deck to not make it too reliant on the graveyard, because naturally, since we're running Arcanist and the Delirium cards, that's already 3 really important cards in the deck that do get hurt by Graveyard Hate. And the traditional weakness of Arcanist decks in the past was that they get really badly hurt by Graveyard Hate, and because of Phoenix and other Arcanist decks, Graveyard Hate is everywhere at the moment, so I didn't want to be running Croxer in addition to these, because then you do make the deck just way too reliant on the graveyard. I think one of the main reasons that people stopped running Aluris in Arcanist and moved more towards the Planeswalker builds was so they were more insulated against Graveyard Hate. And so Rahilda is kind of my version of that in this build. So Rahilda is a really powerful card if you can enable it to attack. A lot of decks aren't great at doing that, but this deck is really strong at enabling Rahilda to get in multiple times, because with our discard spells we can strip the creature removal from our opponent's hand, so the opponent can't just kill Rahilda, and with our creature removal we can just clear the way for Rahilda to attack. And Rahilda is a card that just completely runs away with the game if the opponent can't stop it from getting in. You know, if we can keep connecting with this, it's basically a robber of the rich that's guaranteed to connect every turn. And if the opponent doesn't play anything and it switches to Knight and it gets double strike, then we can get 2 cards off the opponent's deck every turn. So this is just a card that completely runs away with the game once the opponent's at that state where we've stripped them of all their resources. So Rahilda is just a card that completely capitalises on the board state that Arcanist decks are generally trying to achieve. And additionally, like I said, it's not reliant on the graveyard at all, so it will allow us to, you know, beat control decks if they've got a Rest in Peace out, beat other decks if they've got a Soul Guide Lantern on the battlefield. So Rahilda, this deck is so good at enabling it, and it's a really nice threat that's not reliant on the graveyard either. So now we'll move on to the new cards. So I think by far and away the biggest pickup for the Arcanist deck is Painful Bond. So this is the card that came out with the latest Alchemy set, and honestly this could be one of, if not the best cards in Historic right now. It's so good on rate. Being able to draw 2 at instant speed for 2 mana is so strong, and since we're running a Lurrus deck, the drawback on this card is basically non-existent. So Painful Bond, because of the drawback the card has, it's obviously at its home at most in either decks that have a very low mana curve or generally Lurrus decks, because if you're running Lurrus, you're obviously not running any permanents that cost more than 2, so the drawback on this is basically non-existent. And most other Lurrus decks in the format, you know, you've got Golgari Food and Auras. Both of those decks already have pretty decent card advantage engines anyway, so Painful Bond is good in those sorts of decks, you know, especially in the Golgari Food deck. I could see running Painful Bond, but it's not actually solving many of those decks' problems. You know, those are decks that already have good card advantage engines because they're running stuff like Deadly Dispute and Trail of Crumbs, whereas Arcanist has never really had a good card advantage card. And one of the weaknesses of Arcanist in the past was that it really struggled to come back from behind because it didn't have ways to draw extra cards and get back into the game. So Painful Bond is such a good pickup for this deck, just making sure that we don't run out of gas, actually enabling us to win some games from behind because it can get us back, it can draw us multiple cards. And so this card really helps to push this card over the edge, and there's also a really nice reason to be running Lurrus in Arcanist decks again. And the other new card that I'm running in the deck, and this is what kind of separates my list from most other people's, is Life of Toshiro Umezawa. So this is a card that when I first saw it, I didn't think it would see any play in Historic whatsoever. But in this particular deck, it's actually really good. So it's a 2-mana saga. First 2 chapters we get 3 modes. Either a creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, or we gain 2 life. And then on the 3rd chapter, it transforms into a 2/3 that we can tap it and pay 1 life to add black mana and spend that on instants or sorceries. So the first 2 modes, the first ability, being able to give a creature +2/+2 until end of turn, is really nice both with Dreadhorde Arcanist and Rahilda. So especially with Arcanist, the spells that we can cast, you know, flashback from the graveyard, depends on Arcanist's power. So if we buff the Arcanist with Toshiro Umezawa, Arcanist becomes a 3/5, which allows us to recast any 2 or 3 drop instant or sorcery from our graveyard. So if we have a look at the instants and sorceries that we've got on the deck, obviously we've got Painful Bond at 2, we've got Kolaghan's Command at 3, and then in the sideboard we've also got 4 copies of Abrade, which is 2 mana, and 2 copies of Go Blank, which is 3 mana as well. So the fact, you know, that we can turn Arcanist into a 3/5 and flashback Painful Bond is the best card for this. This is the main reason why I was really interested in this kind of synergy going on here. Being able to flashback Painful Bond means that not only does Arcanist now have card advantage, it has a repeatable card advantage, which means that it can come back from behind, and it can really pressure that advantage once it's ahead as well. Now the other cards that we can play off the Arcanist as well, being able to replay K-Command is so strong. This is a really great one to be running in the deck. And then in matchups where we're bringing in Abrade and Go Blank, being able to recast these is absolutely huge as well. So being able to cast 2 or 3 drops off Umezawa with Arcanist is really strong. Then in terms of Rahilda, the biggest weakness of Rahilda is obviously if the opponent has bigger creatures. You know, you can attack and kind of bluff a combat trick and the opponent might not block. But the fact that we can just play Life of Toshiro Umezawa and turn this into a 4/4 first strike makes combat very difficult for the opponent, because it often means that they either have to let it through and give us a free card from their deck, which is really bad for them, or just jump block with creatures. And if it goes to Knight and we have a 2/2 with double strike and we buff it, it becomes a 4/4 double strike, which makes it even more difficult for the opponent to trade off with this in combat. Then additionally, just buffing a Dragon's Rage channel with Delirium is really nice at closing the game out quickly. I've had a few games where I've been able to kind of race in combat with Luris. Buffing a Luris to turn it into a 5/4 lifelinker can cause really big life swings as well. So the +2/+2 ability on this is really nice. Then the second mode, the -1/-1, I didn't think would be that relevant, but there are a surprising number of creatures in the format that are X ones that are really important to be able to kill. Stuff like Llanowar, opposing Dragon's Rage Channeler, Thalia, Esper Sentinel, the list goes on. So you can kill a surprising amount of creatures with this, and if you manage to kill a creature on the first 2 phases of this, you're getting so much value off it. So the fact that this can pick off small creatures that are really important to kill is really nice, kind of works as just additional removal. And then the ability to gain 2 life, like I said with Cling to Dust, one of the weaknesses of Arcanist is against decks that have good reach in the late game. Typically a lot of Arcanist decks didn't have ways to gain life apart from Luris. And so the fact that we have this mode to gain 2 life is actually really relevant against a lot of decks. Burn, Phoenix, the Cat Oven decks as well is really important. And then, even on top of all the value we get off that, it then turns into a creature as well, which, the 2/3 just helps increase our clock once it does flip. And I have used the ramp ability on this as well. Since we're running Painful Bond and we're going to be drawing a lot of cards, since we often want to be paying 4 mana for Bloodchief's Thirst, the extra mana that we can generate off the memory of Toshiro does come up quite a lot as well. So this card works perfectly well in this deck, and I've been really, really impressed with how much value you can get off buffing the Arcanist and recasting the other spells. Then the final spell in the deck, 1 copy of Kolaghan's Command. So this is a card that I'm really happy with as a one-of, because you're always happy to see the first copy, but you never really want to draw it in multiples. The great thing about this card is, having main deck artifact removal is really important against a lot of decks now, especially the food decks and Affinity. But what's really nice about Kolaghan's Command is that we can use it to rebuy Luris. Luris is a very important card in this deck, just because it allows us to rebuy our threats as well as the Toshiro, and as soon as you play the Luris, it's obviously going to be the prime target for the opponent's removal. So especially in grindy matchups, being in particular against other Luris decks, being able to rebuy your Luris once your opponent's lost theirs just means that you're going to run away with the game. So I've been really liking Kolaghan's Command as a one-of, and then obviously we can replay it off the Arcanist with the Umezawa as well, which is really nice. Then in terms of the mana base, 22 lands has felt like a good amount. We have a lot of ways to filter through our deck and draw between Painful Bond and Dragon's Rage Channeler in the early turns, as well as Cling to Dust as well. So 22 has felt like a good amount. We've got 4 creature lands in Hive of the Eye Tyrant and Den of the Bugbear. These are really, really important because a lot of the times we'll have to keep hands with just a bunch of interaction. Hands just with Thoughtseize, Inquisition and removal spells are often good keeps. But it can leave you kind of light on ways to actually apply pressure. So having man lands here is just really great at being able to capitalise on those situations. Additionally, great at being able to pressure planeswalkers as well. Control decks in general are very good at picking off our threats with stuff like March of the Otherworldly Light or Sweepers. So having Hive of the Eye Tyrant and Den of the Bugbear to follow that up and kill planeswalkers is really nice. Hive acting as additional graveyard hate is also especially important right now because of all the graveyard interactions that a lot of decks are running. Then we've got one-offs of Takenuma and Sokenzan because they're basically free in the deck. Sokenzan basically never comes up. I think I've only used the channel ability on this once maybe, but Takenuma is actually really important for a similar reason to Kolaghan's Command in that it allows us to rebuy Luris once it's been killed. So Takenuma in general, if you have other lands to play, this is the land that you want to hold on to for as long as possible if you can, because channeling this to re-get a Luris can just single-handedly win you the game. Then we've got all of the good black-red dual lands. Not worth running Dragon Skull Summit because we're not running many mountains or swamps in the deck, so that would enter tapped too often to be worth running. And then a couple of each basic as well, just to fill out the mana base. And then finally we've got Luris in the deck. Like I said, I think a lot of people moved away from Luris because of graveyard hate and moved more towards the Planeswalker versions. But I feel like Rahilda and Painful Bond give you good ways to generate card advantage, which is a lot of the reasons why people run Planeswalkers. And Rahilda being a good threat that can play through Graveyard Hate, I think is a good enough reason to move back to running Luris again now. Like I said, I think the main reason why people were keen to move away from Lurrus is because those sorts of decks were running, you know, Arcanist, Dragon's Rage Channeler, Croxer, some were even running like Stitcher Supplier and Claim Fame. So those builds of the deck were so heavily reliant on the graveyard that they did just get hosed by graveyard hate. Whereas this build, other than Arcanist and the Delirium cards, we really don't have many other graveyard interactions, so I think it's worth moving back to Lurrus right now. Then onto the sideboard, obviously we've got one slot for the Lurrus, 2 copies of Soul Guide Lantern as additional graveyard hate alongside the Cling to Dust. I think Lantern is very important. In addition, might as well talk about it while we're talking about graveyard hate, but I've also got Go Blank here. So Go Blank is really nice because it pulls double duty in that it's good against the control and slower decks. You know, making the opponent discard 2 is very good against slower combo and control decks. And then the fact that this exiles the opponent's graveyard is really good right now because so many decks are interacting with the graveyard. But I like running a split here because sometimes Go Blank can be a little too slow, you know, particularly against the Greasefang and Phoenix decks. If you're going second and they have a hand where they're bringing back Phoenixes on turn 3 or they're getting Greasefang back on turn 3, Go Blank can be a little slow, so I think having Lantern is really important in those matchups. The fact that it's an artifact is also nice at enabling Delirium as well. So Lantern's just a really effective card right now, and we can cycle it away when we don't need it. Go Blank, like I said, very good at pulling double duty against the slower decks and decks where we need additional graveyard hate. And the fact that we can flash it back with Arcanist using Umezawa is really nice as well. I've done that a couple of times and it just completely shuts the game out. It's so strong. Then we've got 4 copies of Abrade. This is what I'm using as additional creature removal, and the reason I'm running Abrade over something like Molten Impact is mainly consideration for the Affinity deck. I think the Affinity deck is one of the most underrated decks in Historic right now. I absolutely think it's tier 1, and I'm always really impressed when I'm faced against it. So I think it's really important to have artifact removal. I was even considering running maybe a single copy of Shatterstorm in the sideboard as just a complete hoser against that deck. But then I think you're kind of too light on graveyard hate. So again, similar to Go Blank, the great thing about Abrade is that it pulls double duty and that it's creature removal and artifact removal. Additionally, good against the food decks at being able to take out Witch's Oven as well as their other creatures, but you know, this is mainly here for against aggro decks where you need the additional creature removal, and against Affinity where, you know, it's really important to be able to kill stuff like Nettle Cyst and, you know, the tokens they make off Karn, etc. So Abrade is really nice, and again, same as Go Blank, we can cast this off at Arcanist once we buff it with Umezawa as well. A couple copies of Duress, just as additional discard against the control decks. I was originally running Feed the Swarm, which in theory is a card that can deal with Rest in Peace, as well as being additional creature removal, but I was never really impressed with that card because it's kind of bad at both. And since we're building the deck to be kind of resistant to graveyard hate, we're not as concerned about Rest in Peace as a lot of other Arcanist decks. And in particular against control, having Feed the Swarm in your deck felt really bad because there are a lot of times where the opponent won't have Rest in Peace. And the thing is, against control, you're pretty good at stripping them of their resources, but you then need to present a fast clock to prevent them just top decking a Teferi and get backing into the game. So being in those situations and just having a Feed the Swarm sitting in your hand when they don't have Rest in Peace felt really bad. And then as creature removal, you know, 2-mana sorcery where you lose life when you kill a creature really isn't that great either. So I've much preferred Duress as just a way to press the advantage. And, you know, you can just Duress on turn 1 and get rid of Rest in Peace anyway. So it does kind of work in a similar way. And then finally we've got 4 copies of Hidetsugu Consumes All. I think if you're playing Arcanist, you have to be running this as a 4 of in the sideboard right now, just because of the food matchup. One of the main reasons I was never really keen on playing Arcanist before this card came out was just that the food matchup was just so bad. You were a massive underdog in it. But this card single-handedly flips that matchup on its head. Now obviously because it's a 3-drop permanent, we do have to get rid of Lurrus as our companion when we bring this in. But this is, you know, a card that single-handedly flips the food matchup on its head and makes it suddenly good again. So I absolutely think it's worth getting rid of Lurrus just for that matchup. So that's the deck. I've been really impressed with it, and it's been so much fun to actually get back and play Arcanist, and it feel like it's tier 1 again. So if you've got any questions about the deck at all, drop me a comment below and I'll do my best to answer you. Now just onto the gameplay. I've got a few matches that I played on the ladder so you guys can see the deck in action. So I hope you enjoy. Big up. Okay, sweet, here we go. Okay, so going first here, And yeah, this is nice. A little bit annoying about the Haunted Ridge, because we would really like to be able to go turn 1 discard spell into turn 2 Arcanist, but we'll take it still. Okay, so against Heliod Company, definitely going to take the Soul Warden here. Keeping them off their life gain enablers is really important. If they don't have life gain enablers, then both their combo and their other stuff like Voice of the Blessed is really bad. Okay, so Lunark Veteran, they did find another life gain enabler, but we have the second Inquisition here, so we can just get rid of the Voice of the Blessed. And now we've got Life of Toshiro Umezawa, we can kill that Lunark Veteran. A little bit annoying that we didn't draw a land here, but we're definitely going to take the opportunity to kill the Veteran here. Like I said, keeping them off their enablers means that if they have another Trelisara or Voice of the Blessed, it's just going to stay at 2-2, so killing their life gain enablers is really important. If they play the Scurry Oak here, we can kill it with both Umezawas, because we can just play the second. Wow, they play the Phantom, so we just get to kill that Phantom for free off the Umezawa here. So we'll give the Phantom -1/-1. I think here we should probably Painful Bonds. You know, we've missed land drops for a while. As long as we hit 1 black land, we can play Thoughtseize, and we do, which is great. So we'll Thoughtseize here. Perfect timing. Okay, we got the company. So that would have been sketch if we'd missed land drops, but we'd already missed land drops for 2 turns. Drawing an extra 2 cards, I think our chances of drawing a black land there were high enough that that was probably the right play. Now if they play the Soul Warden, we've got another Life of Toshiro Umezawa to kill that. If they play the Scurry Oak, I mean, that's not too bad, really. Like I said, Scurry Oak without a life gain enabler is basically just going to do nothing. So they pass the turn here, so that must mean they've probably drawn Collected Company, which is a bit sketchy. Unfortunately, we can't really do anything about that, so we'll just play Arcanist and Rahilda here. Oh, wow, they don't have Company. Interesting. I mean, I guess they were worried about interaction, but I'm surprised they didn't play anything last turn. You know, they didn't know that we... Okay, sweet, we got there. But yeah, that was a little strange. I don't know why they didn't play anything last turn. So this matchup, definitely want the additional creature removal. So we'll bring in the 4 Braid. We'll make some one-off cuts here. I think we can cut Cling to Dust. We don't need the Graveyard Hate. A Braid is just better than K-Command in general, I think, because we can kill... you know, Voice of the Blessed and Trelisara if they get 1+1/+1 counter off the Soul Warden. Rahilda cutting 1, you know, if we need to just make a trimming down to 3 Rahilda is nice, because obviously it's legendary, so, you know, cutting down to a 3 of a legendary is fine. And while Umezawa is very nice, especially when we're bringing in a Braid, I think everything else in the deck is just too important. You know, this, I think, is going to be a particularly good matchup, because they're a deck that really struggles against discard spells and removal spells, which is basically what our whole deck is. So overall, this is one of the better matchups for us for sure. But you never know. You know, Collected Company is a very good card against us, and we don't really have that much stuff to recover from the combo. You know, you could bring in Hitotsugu Consumes All, but like I said, we're already struggling for stuff to take out, so I don't think that's particularly good. This hand looks great. You know, we've got discard, we've got removal, we've got Rahilda to press the advantage as well. So very happy to keep this. See what the opponent's got. Okay, so they lead on Soul Warden. I mean, we could Thoughtseize on 1 here, but I think it's more important to Unholy Heat, because if we Thoughtseize and they have like 2 Voice of the Blessed or a Voice of the Blessed and a Trelisara, then they'll have a 3/3 that we can't kill very easily. So I think it's important to take out the Warden here. Here we can take out the Sentinel, but I think it's more important here to use a discard spell, because we've struggled to beat Heliod. So I'm going to Inquisition here, just because we really struggle to beat a Resolved Heliod. So if they have that, we really want to take that while we get the opportunity. Okay, they don't have Heliod, they do have Company. I mean, thankfully we have the Thoughtseize for next turn. Just trying to think out of these 2 cards, what's the better to take. Probably going to take the Scurry Oak, because they don't have a life gain enabler. It'll make them play a less mana efficient play this turn, and again, like we've got creature removal for Trelisara and Voice of the Blessed, but the combo we can't really beat, so I think it's more important to take the Scurry Oak there. Unfortunately, we missed land drop again, but we have to just Thoughtseize here, get rid of the Company. I mean, it is very important to keep playing the Sentinel tax here, because we don't want them to get any free draws. The whole point of this deck is to strip them of their resources, so we don't want to give them any free cards. Okay, we missed a land drop again, which is kind of unfortunate. I think I want to kill the Sentinel here, so that we can actually then start playing stuff like Painful Bond next turn. I would have loved to play Umezawa to kill the Sentinel, but like I said, we can't afford to give them any free draws, just because it completely counteracts what we're trying to do. Okay, Heliod is not great, but thankfully we can kill the Trelisara, and thankfully we draw our land drop as well, which is really nice. We have to kill the Trelisara here because they'll just keep giving it lifelink with the Heliod every turn and scrying and making it bigger, so we'll stop that while we can. And now we can finally get Rahilda down as well, which is huge. Now it should be able to run away with the game, hopefully. Okay, they didn't have anything to play, which is great, because then it goes to Knight. Rahilda can get in for 2 hits here, and we can start stealing a couple things from their deck every turn. So we'll see what we hit off the Rahilda here. Okay, Portable Hull, I mean, that doesn't do anything right now, but if they draw anything other than a Scurry Oak, that's going to be great. You know, if they draw a Life Gain Enabler, we can kill that with their Portable Hull, which is huge. So we'll play the Soul Warden here that we also hit. I'm not going to put Lyris into hand because I want to play Painful Bond, and I'm going to play Painful Bond during the opponent's turn because we don't want it to go back to day again. We want Rahilda to stay as a double striker if we can. So we'll see what the opponent draws here. Okay, they just passed the turn back, which could mean Collected Company, which is quite scary, but we'll Painful Bond here anyway. And to be honest, I mean, they could company into the combo and we don't have any instant speed interaction, but that's the absolute worst case scenario. And we do have access to the Portable Hull off the Rahilda attack here, as well as the Umezawa. So I think I'll play out the Channeler here and just Thoughtseize in case they're not holding onto a company. Takanuma. Okay, we'll keep that on top. We do want lands, and it can rebuy Lyris later as well. Okay, they're holding onto a Scurry Oak, so yeah, I think we should be in a great position to win here then. I think the only way they win this game now is exactly company into the combo, because we have access to this Portable Hull. Anything that's not the combo we can kill with their Portable Hull. Ha, company's a pretty good one. So we could play Sentinel here, but I think it's more important to play Arcanist, because we then have access to our whole graveyard's worth of removal interaction off the Arcanist. Yeah, sweet. Okay, sweet, so going first here. And yeah, this hand looks decent. Chandler into Painful Bond is great. We've got Unholy Heat for early interaction if we need it as well. So yeah, we'll just lead on the Chandler here and see what the opponent's on. Okay, so blue-white pathway into Sentinel probably means they're on Affinity here, I'd imagine. So I think we'll probably play Unholy Heat first before the Thoughtseize here, because I really want to have access to 3 mana next turn without having to keep paying this Sentinel tax. So we'll get rid of the Sentinel and just get in with the Channeler here. Rahilda on top's really nice, because that means we can Thoughtseize and get Rahilda down, try and clear the way in case they have a Portable Hull or something like that. Oh wow, they do have a Portable Hull, but thankfully it's being used on the Channeler. We'd much rather the Rahilda live, which is good here. Oh wow, and Relic. Okay, so yeah, like I said, I'm very, very glad that I'm running Rahilda instead of Croxer, because if this Rahilda was a Croxer, we'd just get absolutely... we'd have nothing going on, because the Relic would just shut off the Croxer. So we'll lead on the Thoughtseize here, just to get some more information. Oh wow, they just have a Rebuke, so that's great. That means that if they don't draw anything this turn, that Rahilda will flip and we'll start getting 2 cards off their deck every turn, so... I mean, it would be a little annoying if they top decked a Nettle Cyst here, because it would be a 3-3 and we wouldn't be able to attack in, but we have Painful Bond, we could have drawn for a removal spell. Wow, okay, so the Rahilda does flip, that's great. We get to get in for 2 cards off the opponent's deck here then. Yeah, Rahilda has just been so good in this deck. And running 4 copies, you know, even though we've got a second one now, it's kind of good because whilst Rahilda is on the board, we're kind of winning. And if they do kill the first one, we have the second one as a backup anyway. So we'll play the Shadow Spear here. Thought Monitor we're probably not going to get to cast. We could put Lyrus into hand, but I think I'd rather play Painful Bond here. And we're going to play Painful Bond during the opponent's turn because we don't want to play 2 spells during our turn because it will flip back to day and then Rihilda will lose double strike. So we'll just go for Painful Bond during the opponent's turn here. Okay, so they crack the Relic, which has got to be good for us, but they've had quite a few looks at drawing new cards here, so... Okay, Khan. I mean, that's quite a scary one. Thankfully, we have the Shadow Spear here, which means that we are guaranteed to kill the Khan next turn because we can turn it into a 3/3 trample double strike, kind of like a build your own Embercleave. Okay, nice. So we've got Channeler and Inquisition. That's pretty good. So I think I'm trying to think whether I want an Inquisition before combat. I mean, regardless of what the opponent has, I think we're still going to want to kill the Khan here because we definitely don't want them to be making another token, and we don't want them to start plussing it either. So we'll kill the Khan. We do have to deal with this 3/3 at some point though, which will be a little bit annoying. But we've got Channeler to start digging for removal spells, so which is obviously great for us. Oh no, opponent. They obviously forgot that we had double strike, so I mean they just threw away their token there, but we do have a lot of looks at removal, so I'm not sure that matters that much. Okay, we'll definitely bin a land here, see what the opponent's got. Okay, another Khan. So maybe them throwing away that 3/3 would have mattered. I think them having 2 3/3s that can scale is problematic. Now obviously we do have Bloodchief's Thirst that can take them out. And now they've cracked the Relic, we can achieve Delirium for Unholy Heat as well. So I still think we would have probably been in a winning position even if they hadn't thrown away that 3/3 there. So here we can guarantee, even though Rihilda's gone back to day again, we can guaranteed kill the Khan here if we fire up the Den of the Bugbear. So I think what we'll do is we'll fire up the Den, we'll attack the Khan with both Rihilda and the Den here. We'll attack them with the 1/1. So we need to take this Khan out, and then all we have to do is find a removal spell for the 3/3, and Rihilda will go back to night again, thankfully. Oh wow, they're trading with the Den. I mean, I'm pretty happy about that, because I am kind of scared about this 3/3, because if we don't find Bloodchief's Thirst, then it can outscale the Unholy Heat removal if they keep playing more artifacts. So Rihilda flips back to night again. We've got a 3/3 double striker that's going to be getting in for 2 extra cards next turn if they don't play anything big here. Wow, they just pass. So that's got to be good for us, right? So we'll get in with everything. Affinity doesn't play any instant speed interaction as far as I'm aware, so we're guaranteed another 2 cards here, and I'm pretty confident about our chances this game now. Okay, Nettle Sister's nice, but it basically just acts as a 2/2 here, but... And, okay, Rebuke is basically a whiff, because they don't play any instant speed interaction, we're never going to use that. At least we get the Surveil off the DRC here, that's pretty nice. Okay, sweet, yeah. So once again, Rihilda putting in work in that matchup. So here, we obviously want a Braid. Don't want Cling to Dust, because we don't really need the Graveyard Hate. Definitely do want K Command, because that's additional artifact removal. I think I can trim an Umezawa. Trim a Thoughtseize, and probably trim a Rihilda as well. You know, going down to, even though it was really good that last matchup, going down to 3 of a legendary creature is never going to be too bad. And then we run it back. Oh wait, actually, yeah, I should have trimmed an Inquisition rather than a Thoughtseize there. For some reason, I thought we were against an aggressive deck, but we're not really. So we definitely, yeah, that was a big mistake. We should have taken out an Inquisition rather than a Thoughtseize, because Thoughtseize being able to hit Khan and Thought Monitor is really important. So hopefully that doesn't come back to bite us, but we'll see. So I'm never really happy keeping 1-landers in this deck, because we don't have any 1-mana ways to draw cards, so we'll mulligan that. Don't have any creatures, but the interaction here is pretty good, and we've got Painful Bond, so I'm very happy to keep this. And I think I'll put back a Sokenzan, because we're almost certainly going to be playing this Mountain on turn 2, and so we're better off putting Sokenzan back in our deck, where we might actually use the channel later in the game. Pretty marginal, but... Okay, we'll lead on Inquisition here. Take the Nettlesis. So yeah, I mean, there is a chance that we might draw an Inquisition and not be able to take that Thought Monitor or Reverse Engineering. So yeah, like I said, it was definitely a mistake taking out Thoughtseize rather than Inquisition. But in matchups where they're aggressive or they have good reach in the late game, it's definitely better to trim Thoughtseize because the 2 life definitely does matter. So opponent leads on Relic here, which, I mean, they're kind of incentivized to crack it, but they're also kind of incentivized not to because both the cards in their hand want artifacts in play, so either way, opponent's kind of running on empty already, which is good, but both cards in their hand, if they do get to a point where they can cast them, will get them back into the game, so Channel is interesting. I think we're definitely going to Painful Bond, and I think we're probably better off doing it during our turn, actually, because the opponent could draw a Metallic Rebuke, and I think it is important that we do resolve the Painful Bond. There's very little advantage of us playing it during our opponent's turn here, so we might as well just fire it off now. So, the lands are a little bit awkward here, because if we play the pathway to allow us to play Rahilda and Channeler, we can't play Bloodchief's Thirst next turn, so we'd love to draw another untapped land here so that we can play Rahilda and Channeler, and still be able to play Bloodchief's Thirst to take out Thought Monitor if they can play that. Okay, so they have Shadow Spear, so they're getting close to being able to cast the Reverse Engineering here. Okay, perfect. So we drew a Haunted Ridge, which means we can play Channeler and Rahilda now, and we can still hold up kicked Bloodchief's Thirst if they do manage to play that Thought Monitor so that we can get in with Rahilda here. So yeah, I've been really impressed with Rahilda in this deck. It basically just, the opponent just has to find an answer straight away or we just start running away with the game. Okay, so they cracked the Relic. That's got to be good for us because that keeps, you know, that means that they're way less likely to be able to cast Thought Monitor now. But I guess they're just trying to find a creature to block with. I mean, they can play Reverse Engineering here, which, you know, we'd only get in with 1 hit for Rahilda, and they're probably bringing in Glass Casket against us as well as Portable Hole, so, okay, they did find the Portable Hole. So they did find the answer for Rahilda, but we've still got Channeler here, we've still got Painful Bond and Bloodchief's Thirst, so I still think we're in a reasonable spot. They can still play Reverse Engineering here, yeah. So they draw 3 cards. So I think we'll lead on Painful Bond here, see what we draw. Okay, definitely don't want another land. Okay, Inquisition and a Braid, that's interesting. I think, you know, having a Braid to kill the Portable Hole is nice, but after they've drawn 3, I think it's really important that we Inquisition here. Definitely going to bin that because it will help us get Delirium. Okay, yeah, I mean, if that Inquisition had been the Thoughtseize that we would have kept in the deck, that would have been a lot different, but I still think we have the tempo advantage here. The opponent has, you know, they have a lot of good stuff, but they're not going to be able to play multiple spells in a turn for a little while. So, you know, even if they play Karn here, we can just kill it immediately, and we have removal spells for the token if they make that as well. Well, I assume they minus here. I don't think they can really get away with plussing when we have Hive of the Eye Tyrant as well. Okay, Unholy Heat's great. We just want to see extra removal spells here. Because if we draw extra removal spells, that means that we can afford to use the Abrade as artifact removal rather than creature removal, which means that we can hopefully get Rahilda back and start getting in with that. Okay, so we take out the token here, and then we can just take out the Karn as well. And then we could put Lurrus into hand here, but like I said, I think now that we've drawn an Unholy Heat, we're pretty happy just using this Abrade to kill the Portable Hole during the opponent's turn and trying to get in with Rahilda. Okay, so they play the other Karn. Assume they minus here again because they do have Shadow Spear. So they can, or in theory they can try and start racing here, but thankfully we have the Unholy Heat. So they try and equip the Shadow Spear, we'll just Unholy Heat in response. Bloodchief's Thirst, brilliant. Okay, so now we have an answer for the Thought Monitor as well. So we can kill the Portable Hole with the Braid, get back the Rahilda, then we can kill the Karn with the Channeler, get in with the Rahilda, and now we have an answer for the Channeler to keep getting in with Rahilda the following turns as well. I'm not going to attack with the Hive here, just in case, because we could hit something like a Karn off the Rahilda that we'd want to be able to play with more mana. Okay, Nettle Assist, I mean, that's not the best, but we get an extra creature and we get a Surveil off the Channeler, so it's not too bad. And then we can put... Okay, we want as much removal as we can just to keep Rahilda getting in here. And then we can just put Lyris into hand as well. So the opponent can play Thought Monitor here, which can get them a couple cards, but we're pretty ahead on tempo, and we have more removal spells coming here as well, so this is looking pretty good at the moment. Okay, Sentinel. That's a little bit annoying, because I don't know how happy I am giving them the option to just chump with the Sentinel here. You know, we have enough mana that I don't think the tax is really going to do much. Okay, Portable Hole, that's a bit annoying. Because now we won't be able to... Oh wow, they take the Channeler. Okay, I'm very happy about that. Rahilda is definitely the bigger threat right now, I think. So I think I'm going to lead with Bloodchief's Thirst on the Sentinel here, just because I don't really want to give them the option of just chumping with the Sentinel. If we take out the Sentinel here, the opponent either has to let us get in with Rahilda or trade for the Thought Monitor, and then they're completely out of stuff on board here. I mean, maybe we were happy with just trading with the Sentinel and keeping the Bloodchief's Thirst for another creature, but I don't know. Okay. I mean, if we'd have attacked and held on to the Bloodchief's Thirst, we could have then used Glass Casket on the Sentinel instead, but at least now we have Glass Casket available for if they draw like a Nettle Cyst or an Ingenious Smith or something, so I think that was probably the right play. Because the opponent can gain some tempo back there by just chump blocking with Sentinel and not letting us get in with Rahilda. Okay, another Sentinel, so I think we'll just take out the Thought Monitor here. Even though it's not a massive threat, they could either start swinging, and that's a pretty, 3 life swing every turn when we're not applying that much pressure is fairly big. And also they could just hold the Monitor back to block our Rahilda every turn, so... So I think I'm happy attacking with Rahilda first here. We could have played the Toshiro to buff the Sentinel. To buff the Nettle Cyst to get in as well, but just in case we hit like a Khan or something, I'd rather attack first. We can Glass Casket the Sentinel here from last turn, which is great. We're definitely going to pay the tax here, because we don't want to give the opponent any free cards. Yeah, maybe it was correct to play Toshiro, but if we'd have hit a Khan or something, I think I would have rather had the option to play that. So I think we'll play the Umezawa here just to be mana efficient, because we still likely have lethal next turn even without the Channeler. Because we can buff one of our creatures with the Umezawa, and we've got Hive and Nettle Cyst and Rahilda as well, so they need a blocker here or we just win next turn. Okay, wow. The Rahilda flips as well, so yeah, we've definitely got lethal here now. Unless the opponent has like another Otawara or like a Moonsnare prototype. So we'll buff the Lyris, fire up the Hive here. Does the opponent have something? I guess we'll exile the Thought Monitor just in case they do have something and they're playing Emery maybe. Oh, okay, it doesn't look like they have anything. Sweet, we got there, nice. Okay, sweet. Yeah, this hand looks good. Again, slightly annoying about Haunted Ridge, but, Channeler, Arcanist and Painful Bond is kind of all you can ask for here. Painful Bond in particular is really sick, especially with double Channeler. Even if we don't draw an untapped land for turn 2, we can still play our second Channeler out and then get 2 Surveils before our Painful Bond, which is pretty sick. Okay, so Thoughtseize, so... Opponent taking the Painful Bond could be bad here, but there is some kind of incentive for them to take Rahilda as well if they don't have removal. Yeah, that's fair enough. Because if we drew an untapped land there and they don't have removal, Rahilda could just start running away with the game. So we didn't draw an untapped land. We get to play out the second channeler here. Hopefully the opponent doesn't have another discard spell, because then we can Painful Bond with 2 Surveils. Sweet. So we get to Painful Bond here. Just looking for a land. Yeah, sweet. Even though Den's tapped, we just want a 3rd land here. So, and another Painful Bond is great here. So we're getting. Opponent's already down to 13, which is, you know, pretty low for this early in the game. So another land is great. We'll attack him with the channelers here, and we'll play Arcanist, and we will wait until the end of the opponent's turn to play Painful Bond, because there's always a chance we might want to use the Unholy Heats here. Cry of the Carnarium. So we'll definitely Painful Bond now to get the Surveils before the channelers die. Okay, we'll bin the Cling to Dust for sure. And don't think we want Rahilda. I'd rather try and get our 5th land or a... Okay, perfect. Or an Umezawa so that we can flash back the Painful Bond. Okay, sweet. So we get to play the Umezawa here, turn Arcanist into a 3/5, and flash back the Painful Bonds to hopefully find our 5th land. And then we have Den of the Bugbear live, which is huge. And now we've got a pretty fast clock as well. The opponent's already down to 8. Arcanist will be a 3/5 again next turn, and we have access to Den of the Bugbear, in addition to the 2 damage off Kolaghan's command. Okay, wow, Chainer's Edict, I wasn't expecting that. I guess that's just the same as any removal spell though, right? In this context anyway. And Ranger class, okay, so we're definitely going to fire off K-Command here. Now we could get a creature back, but I feel like I'd rather make the opponent discard a card here while we have Den of the Bugbear live, because we can fire up Den during our upkeep before the Umezawa triggers and give the Den +2/+2. So by the way, if you want to make this play, it's really important that you set a stop during the upkeep, because if you don't set a stop during the upkeep, Arena will just instantly go to the start of your main phase, and if you don't have any creatures, Umezawa will only give the option to gain 2 life. So if you don't set a stop, you won't get the opportunity to buff your creature lands. So if you're thinking about doing that, just always remember to set a stop during the upkeep. Okay, so Llanowar Elves, we can just kill that with the Unholy Heat. What's the last card in their hand here? Okay, another Chainer's Edict, so we just win here then. We can kill the Llanowar Elves and then just win with the Hive next turn. So, opponent looks like they're just on some Abzan mid-range deck, which... Okay, sweet. Looks like it should be a pretty good matchup for us, because it doesn't look like a particularly quick deck. Let's see what they've got here. So, Renin 7, some removal. Chainer's Edict is a weird one. I don't think that card is good at all, but... Yeah, it's hard to know what to sideboard here. I guess that's the advantage of playing your own brew, is that we just don't know what cards they've got in their deck. And in that situation, you know, I think our main deck is pretty well set up against most things. So I don't want to try and second guess and sideboard wrong. You know, I guess that is the advantage of playing a brew, that the opponent could have something in their deck that we would need a sideboard card to be able to beat, but we just don't know about it. But like I said, I think Arcanist is pretty good against slower decks for sure, because of the amount of discard spells that we have, and because of Arcanist we can obviously replay the discard spells, so even if the opponent has something problematic, we can often just deal with it before it even enters the battlefield because of Thoughtseize. But yeah, I mean, overall, this is the kind of deck that we prey on. Mid-range, control, just slow decks in general. But having said that, because we also run the cheapest creature removal, we're also fairly good against the aggressive decks as well. I would say that like all in aggro, maybe like a really low to the ground humans, or especially humans with Esper Sentinel and Thalia are probably tricky matchups for Arcanist, but they're really not played at the moment. There isn't really that much aggro in the format, so I think this is a great time to be playing Arcanist. Okay, so going second here, and yeah, this looks great. Turn 1 discard spell into turn 2 Arcanist is always what you want to see. Okay, tap land for the opponent. We'll just lead on an Inquisition here. Okay. So Duress does nothing against us. Our hand is pretty Thoughtseize proof as well because we have the double Arcanist. Cry of the Carnarium only hits Channeler. So I think I'm inclined to take the Ranger class here because we don't currently have a way to kill the token it creates. And also, it could be problematic if they get to the point, you know, we don't have any enchantment removal because we're not running Feed the Swarm. So if they get to the point where they get to the last chapter of Ranger class, that is a way that they can just win the game with just more card advantage than we can handle. So I think Ranger class is definitely the pick there. So Thoughtseize us. I assume they take the Arcanist because they have Cry of the Carnarium for the Dragon's Rage Channeler. So we'll play Arcanist here. And honestly, Umezawa is a pretty good draw here because if they have a land for that Briarbridge tracker, that kind of stonewalls Arcanist normally. But because we have the Umezawa here, we can buff the Arcanist so it can attack, and we can use the Inquisition to take the Cry of the Carnarium or whatever else they have, which means if we do get to take the Cry, that'll be nice because I don't think we want the second discard spell because they're almost empty-handed already. But yeah, if they don't have anything else in hand, we can take the Cry of the Carnarium, which means that our Channeler also gets to live here, which is nice. Okay, yeah, Bloodchief's Thirst is great because that gives us a way to kill the tracker. Duress we don't really care about because we don't, you know, we've just got 2 lands in hand. And so yeah, I feel fairly good about this. Okay, Thoughtseize doesn't do anything. So I assume they just crack the clue here. Try and find a land, maybe. Although if they crack the clue, it turns the tracker into a 2/3, which means that we can freely attack with Arcanist after the Umezawa disappears, so I mean, I don't get why they just used the duress there, but oh well. So what do we want to do here? I think we probably just want to buff the Arcanist again. And I think we're also fine just using the Bloodchief's Thirst here, because even if they draw something problematic, we can just flash back the Bloodchief's Thirst with the Arcanist. Definitely don't want another land here. We can get them for 4, put them down to 9, and then because we have the 5th land, we also have access to Hive of the Eye Tyrant next turn as well, so I think we're in a pretty sweet spot here. Okay, Knight of the Ebon Legion. And they crack the clue. Okay, nice, yeah, we got there.